Hi friends, I am Julia, and if you have been following along with me, you know that I'm all about helping you master GMAT Verbal. Today, we are diving into an important concept that separates strong test takers from the struggling test takers. This is the difference between understanding material and simply memorizing material. When it comes to the verbal section, the goal is to understand what you are reading. Even if you don't know all of the tricks, if you understand, then you have a much better chance than if you simply memorize things and think that that will carry you through. Because anyone can memorize facts, and as far as the passages are concerned, the GMAT is open book. The passage will be available to you while you are answering all of the questions, and you can review specifics at any time. Business schools don't use this test because they want people who can simply regurgitate what they've read. They want people who can reason through provided information, and that is what the verbal section tests. In practice, the difference between memorization and understanding can be hard to see, especially at first, if you are more experienced with memorization style tests than reasoning focused tests, which is very likely because they are a lot more common. Let me show you exactly how the difference might manifest with a TTP reading comp example. One theme common to authoritarian regimes is the silencing of dissenting voices. Such governments typically vigorously employ various means, including restrictive laws, surveillance, and brute force, to prevent both individuals and organizations from expressing opinions that do not match the narratives the regimes seek to promote. Ironically, it is rather easy for any observer of political matters to understand how success in silencing dissenting voices can lead to the collapse of the very regime that sought to achieve that success. In suppressing speech, a regime reduces the flow of not only information that threatens the stability of the regime, but also information necessary for the functioning of the regime or of the society over which the regime wields power. Often, these two types of information are either difficult to distinguish or one and the same. As a result, both the regime and the society can become deprived of critical information. Initially, it may appear that the regime can survive the lack of such information, and some repressive authoritarian regimes do remain in power for long periods of time. However, in a large proportion of cases, a regime operating without sufficient information will make major missteps as a result, causing itself or the society over which it wields power to experience extreme instability or deterioration that leads to the sometimes dramatic downfall of the regime. Here is our question. This is a primary purpose question. Let's talk about what a student might do if they were relying on more of a memorization approach. They might recall or scan the passage and see the phrase theme common to authoritarian regimes and think, oh, this must be about characteristics of authoritarian regimes. So they pick D, and guess what? That is a trap. D isn't completely off base. It is something that the passage does, but it fails to capture the point of the whole passage. Presenting this theme that's common to authoritarian regimes is not the primary purpose here, which is what we are looking for. Why might these people fall for D? Because they read and they remembered the first sentence, but they didn't take the time to interact with the passage and build the understanding necessary to see how it evolved. What about students that do focus on understanding? You'd notice that the first paragraph here sets the stage, but the second paragraph is doing a lot of the author's heavy lifting. That's where the real purpose of the passage unfolds. The author is not just describing a characteristic. The author is explaining the consequences of that characteristic, specifically how silencing dissent can ironically lead to a regime's collapse. So, which answer best reflects that understanding? C. Explaining why a governmental practice often has unintended effects. This one seems a bit vague at first glance, but this is an answer that shows you grasped not just what was said, but what the author meant by it. Surface level reading and memorization might get you halfway there. It'll help you rule out some simpler trap answers, like E, comparing the effects of different forms of government on societies, because you'll be able to quickly see that in this case, only one form of government is discussed. But understanding is required to rule out traps that are much more on topic and well crafted. Here's where this comes into play on test day. The GMAT loves to hide the right answer behind subtle phrasing. This is certainly an example of that. If you're just matching words or memorizing outlines or quickly scanning things without reading them for comprehension, you will be vulnerable and you can fall for traps. But if you understand the flow of logic, the author's intent, and the relationship between ideas, you'll be able to spot the right answer even when it's worded differently from how you might have put it. So if you are stuck on a verbal score that is not where you want it to be, this might be your way to unlock a higher score. Shift your focus from trying to remember what the passage said and start asking why it said what it said, why it put this information here and this other information over here. What's the deeper point? What's the effect of what's happening? Why did the author bother to write this and to write it in this way? Memorization is passive. Understanding is active. You are engaging with the content. The GMAT rewards active thinkers. Until next time, focus on comprehension and keep up the good work.